Question: chances of him going pro se. We kind of touched on this earlier, but I'm going to combine that with another question from Crypto Man 5000. Shouldn't this case be presented to a federal grand jury? He crossed state lines, etc. So first question, chances of going pro se. Second, should this go to a federal grand jury because he crossed state lines allegedly?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, like we said earlier, every defendant has the right to defend themselves up in court, and that's a basic right that you can exercise. It's not advisable, especially if you're not trained in the legal system. Even when you do represent yourself, as we saw in the Darrell Brooks case, you get assigned an attorney by the court to kind of offer advice and guidance to you if you're representing yourself. Now, the person can either rely on that advice or completely ignore it if they want. And we saw the disastrous effects it had in the Darrell Brooks trial. And so it's never, I mean, to me, it's never advisable to represent yourself unless you have some kind of legal background or understand how the legal system works. Because, you know, we often see this when we watch trials a long time, that people don't understand why certain things are happening in a courtroom the way they do. And there's reasons for that, but you have to be a trained, you know, lawyer or in the legal field to understand those reasons. And it's really a minefield if you don't have that familiarity with the rules of evidence and things like that, and you can really do yourself a disservice by representing yourself. And so, what was the second part of that question, Jeanette?
The second one was, shouldn't this case be presented to a federal grand jury? He crossed state lines, allegedly, you know, coming from Washington to Idaho. So crossing state lines can make something a federal crime.
Well, it can, but I mean, not in this case. This is a local homicide committed, you know, in a local jurisdiction, and the federal nexus of crossing state lines, you know, could invoke a federal law. But in this case, I don't see that. Federal homicides are usually confined to certain areas like racketeering, particularly the mafia or drug gangs and cartels. And things like that. In this case, there's no reason to present it federally. There wouldn't be any benefit, I don't think, and I don't think it's you know, you'd have to find which federal act or which federal law it violates. But this is a local homicide. This is by its nature, a very local homicide case, and I think it belongs in the state court.
Yeah, I would think so too. As far as, you know, crossing over state lines doesn't really fit with this type of case, since it is, you know, a homicide case in state court. I will throw this one to you, Joseph. Have they found the knife, and how important is it that they find the murder weapon in this case? This comes from Diane Zantana on YouTube.
Hey, Diana. No, to the best of my knowledge, they haven't. I think the thing I've been curious about all along, because they were very specific with their descriptors about the weapon, the alleged weapon that was used in this case, and they've used terms to describe it as military style, hunting style. There was even Rambo floating around. K-Bar is a specific brand, but those fit a specific weapon profile. The term large knife has been used as well. My question, I think, I don't think they have the weapon. However, how did they arrive at that conclusion? There's been a lot of stuff floating around the internet relative to the news media going in to interview shop owners saying, was this type of knife purchased there? I don't know that anybody's been able to confirm that necessarily. So that brings us back to more of a fact-based crime scene investigation. Was most of these knives have a sheath? Was it dropped at the scene? You know, and I think that's a very basic question. It certainly needs to be asked. We'll find out if that is the case, but that would certainly be a tie back. I think the weapon is going to be important.
That's a big piece as well. And I kind of have a question for Bobby Chacon about that. I would assume that the FBI would be involved in processing that vehicle. There have been rumors that there was a cleanup job performed on that vehicle. We don't have that confirmed. The FBI, though, if they are processing this vehicle, how easily can they find things, even if something had been cleaned up?
Well, I mean, they can. And in fact, when I used to work on a forensic team in the FBI, the evidence response team, I ran the underwater portion of it. But my colleagues on the dry land portion of it, we shared a warehouse. And on their side of the warehouse, they had vehicle lifts because they did so many processing of vehicles, the kind of lift you'd see in a mechanic's garage. And they would process so many vehicles that they actually had a lift. And they would lift that vehicle, go under it and over it. And, sometimes they try to clean it. Sometimes you get evidence of cleaning, and that could be actually a consciousness of guilt later if you have a crime scene specialist come in and testify that clearly there were attempts made to clean this with bleach or whatever. But they still can fight through that. It takes a lot, particularly like the doc described. If he had a lot of blood on him when he got in that car, that blood would get everywhere in nooks and crannies. And it's really hard to completely sanitize a vehicle like that if you get in there with that amount of blood on you. So hopefully that's the case. And it's not easy, but they certainly have the ability to get to that evidence in that car, even after attempts have been made to clean it.
Yeah, Anjanette, one more point.
And here's a question. Oh, sure.
Yeah, to Bobby's point, I think people might be interested in this as well. There's actually a device that's called an MVAC, which is, just imagine a miniature vacuum cleaner that squirts water or fluid into an area, and then it's sucked back up. And it can extract at a deep strata whatever's contained in there, okay? And then it goes into a holding tank, and you change these filters out, for every time you utilize this thing. And it's amazing how deep they can get in these environments. People talk about deep cleanings, and this thing goes deep. It accounts for all of that. So that's a big. We've taken leaps and bounds. We've jumped ahead in the recovery of evidence. I think that there will be something left behind. There's a lot of things we do unconsciously in a car when we're mounting up to go somewhere. I'd like everybody that's listening and watching this, think about this the next time you get inside of your vehicle. Think about all the points of contact you have on your vehicle, from lifting the handle to handling the keys to using the gear lever to the steering wheel, adjusting mirrors, all of these things that you do unconsciously. These are things that he may not have considered, not to mention those things that he passively left behind. So to Bobby's point, they get that thing in a lab, they're going to tear it apart. They'll take the seats out of it. They'll go down to the substrata in this vehicle.
And also probably use, I'm assuming, a black light or something like that, that will show not only blood residue that maybe it was cleaned up, but it shows a lot of things, actually. A lot of things will appear under a black light, but they could find some evidence that way as well. We're getting to more of your questions. Keep them